Nawal, to what extent do you think the people who go should be held accountable for their own actions and should be criticised for doing that?
I think that at this point in time, it's very obvious that it's very illegal, and so therefore punishment is, it's inevitable. And I also think that there needs to be more sort of like de-radicalisation projects and other solutions to...
Right, now what do you think makes them go? Do you think they think about it and come to a rational decision? Or is there something else going on? We're talking about teenagers sometimes, quite young teenagers.
I think that there needs to be a distinction between the different people who go and for the various different reasons. I think that there are some young women who actually find themselves caught up in these situations because they have existing relationships, husbands, family, who are in these conflict areas and feel a sense of loyalty towards them.
And you had a friend who went out?
Yes.
Was that her situation?
That was her situation. On the other hand, there are young people, young women in particular, who are, they're quite sort of vulnerable to radicalisation, and I feel that in some cases it may be because they may feel a sense of injustice.
Well, it could be, but one person said it was almost like One Direction. They form an attachment to something, and it's a sort of emotional attachment, and it's not really a rational thing. It's not about foreign policy or about the merits.
Well, for those women in particular, I'd say that these are young women who are actually, basically, they would be more susceptible to radicalisation because they are young. And as we've seen, the majority of these people are quite young. And it's more of a rebelliousness rather than something they've probably thought through. It's the same way that the young people maybe have a drug addiction or choose a destructive lifestyle.
Look, let me bring Anwar into this. And I mean, who do you blame?
I don't think it's a question of the blame game. The problem for the last decade has been that the governments have repeatedly blamed the Muslim community, have blamed the mosques. But what we've seen in the last few years in relation to ISIS is that the idea of blaming the mosques, frankly, is ridiculous, because we have to search high and low to find these so-called radical preachers. Much of what is happening today is online radicalization, and the danger is this: by looking to so-called community leaders whose average age within the Muslim community will be 70, the idea that somehow they are in touch with young people 15, 16 years old is frankly ridiculous. And what has been created in the so-called war on terror in the last decade is a vacuum, which means that mosques and communities up and down this country have been politically neutered, where there is no longer any rational debate on social or political issues of the day, which then means there is a vacuum created which young people will go into online to seek answers, and waiting in the wings, quite conveniently, are the likes of ISIS, who run a very slick propaganda outfit with a $2 billion budget that would be able to compete with any global advertising agency and targets members of the younger audience. And the idea that somehow some community leader stands up, reads a verse of the Quran and says Islam is a religion of peace, and that somehow will win over these young people is impossible.
So what are you advocating? What are you advocating?
Well, what I'm advocating is that there needs to be a national strategy. What we have seen is successive governments. It's interesting, you had Tony Blair earlier on. His response to 7/7 was to turn around and deny any connection to foreign wars, the war in Iraq, despite intelligence briefings. He described it as the, people recruited to terrorism as a perverted evil ideology. Yes, that's accepted by everybody across the board, but where does that get us? What we need is a national strategy that combines not just the Muslim community, not just the community leaders, but even if you look at the question of social media, there are no families in this country that are receiving actual information from the government, from the police, on how to combat these evils, how to actually monitor their children on social media. Politics are not discussed within the mosques, which means children will go online, will go into their communities and talk to other people, and those people remain unchallenged.
No.
So we need to engage, and it means that we can't just say, well, we're not going to discuss our double standards, we're not going to discuss rendition, we're not going to discuss, Palestine and all those issues, which clearly these young people are being attracted to, and the politicians are unable to engage with them unless we allow a rational political debate to take place without accusations of being apologists for terrorism. Then it means that young people will simply switch off, walk away, and go online and be able to communicate with these individuals.
We need to leave it there, I'm afraid, Anwar and Nawal. Thank you very much indeed. And just a reminder, you can watch that full hour-long This World documentary, Britain's Jihadi Brides. It's at 9 o'clock tomorrow on BBC Two.